Welcome, everyone. We're diving deep into the world of Ben Liebrand. For anyone who might not know, that's Ben Liebrand. We've got a really cool mix of stuff to explore, like radio interviews, articles. We even dug up some old production notes and fanzine snippets. This is going to be quite a ride.
It really is. What I find so fascinating is how Ben's career goes through all these different changes in music technology.
Yeah.
From like cassette decks and turntables in the beginning to the whole digital revolution. And still, throughout all of that, there's this like thread of innovation and like a dedication to pushing the limits of mixing.
It's like from the very beginning, he was this like sonic scientist almost. Not just into music, but also how it's all made, the tools, the techniques. And his early influences, Giorgio Moroder, Jean-Michel Jarre, Kraftwerk, they were all pushing things forward with electronic music, weren't they?
Yeah, experimenting with synths and like seeing what technology could really do.
And you can see that experimental side in Ben's early work, too.
For sure.
I mean, can you imagine making your first mix in 1977 with just a cassette deck and the pause button?
That's amazing.
That's not just clever. That's like real resourcefulness and drive to create even without fancy equipment.
It's like he was a mixer at heart, even before he had, proper gear.
Right. And I read that when he was a teenager, he was already DJing with this mobile drive-in show back in '76. Just picture it. Hauling your equipment around, setting up in parking lots, playing music for a bunch of cars.
Talk about an entrepreneurial spirit. And what's really interesting is that even back then, he was like super organized and methodical. I was surprised to learn he was sorting his records by BPM as early as 78.
Wow, way ahead of the curve.
Totally.
It's like he just knew how important beat matching and smooth transitions were going to be even before everyone else was doing it.
Exactly. It suggests a deep understanding of rhythm and flow, which became his signature later on. But it wasn't always easy for him. Apparently his equipment back then was really delicate, not really built for wild parties, like one spilled drink could ruin everything. So he started focusing more on the studio. That's where things really took off for him.
So it's like limitations can sometimes actually spark innovation.
Right.
Being pushed back into the studio forced him to get even more experimental with his mixing.
Definitely.
And that led to some groundbreaking stuff, especially on the radio.
Oh, for sure. In 1983, he became the first DJ on Dutch national radio to have a non-stop mix show in the mix on Veronica. Can you imagine that back then? A whole hour of continuous music all blended together. That was unheard of.
It's hard to imagine radio today without mix shows, right?
Yeah.
He was a real pioneer. And it wasn't just the technical side of it. It was his attitude, too. I read that during his on-air intro, he refused to answer any questions.
What? Really?
Yeah, he just let the music speak for itself.
That's so cool. It's like he knew he was onto something special.
Totally.
That's so Ben Liebrand, confident letting the art do the talking. And what really made him a legend was when he started the Grandmix at the end of '83.
The Grandmix. Tell me more about what made those mixes so special.
Well, he took the idea of a year-end mix and blew it up. He would pick all the best dance tracks of the year and mix them together into a whole hour of music. This amazing sonic tapestry that captured the energy of the whole year. And that was super uncommon. Then most mixes were just the length of a vinyl record.
You'd think with something so ambitious, he would have had this big studio audience or some big celebration when it aired.
Yeah.
But actually, it was the opposite.
I know, right? It's almost funny to think about.
It is.
He often talks about being totally alone in the studio, just him and some board technician, no audience, no hype, just pure dedication. Incredible, really.
That's wild. It really shows you what mattered most to him. It wasn't fame or attention. It was all about the music, the art of mixing. And his remixing process back then, that's something that's always blown me away. It was like sonic surgery.
Right.
He had to be so creative and resourceful to get the sounds he wanted.
Oh, absolutely. He would use anything. Snippets of tracks, multi-tracks, acapellas. He'd even re-record parts himself.
I remember reading about him using a vocoder to get a specific vocal effect for the Grandmix Summer Edition. The patience that must have taken. No digital workstations, no easy editing. It was a whole different world.
I know. It was a totally different world. And he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, really experiment and see what he could do with that old analog equipment. And speaking of limitations, we can't forget about the challenges of the pre-internet era.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. Limited feedback, bootlegs everywhere. It must have been so frustrating.
Oh, it was. He's talked about how hard it was to get any feedback on his mixes. He mostly relied on word of mouth and maybe a fan letter here and there. And then there were the bootlegs. People were copying and spreading his mixes without his permission, which was a huge problem for artists and producers back then.
There's that amazing story about the DHL worker who had no idea they were holding the master tapes for the Salt-N-Pepa Let's Talk About Sex remix. And that remix became a global smash hit.
It's crazy.
It's like fate intervened.
It really shows you how unpredictable the music industry was back then. And Ben, even with all those challenges, managed to make it to the top. But all this talk about analog technology makes me think about, the big debate. Vinyl versus digital.
Ah, yes, the age-old argument. And Ben's actually got a pretty surprising take on this. He's not one of those vinyl purists, is he?
No, not at all. He actually believes that digital can be even better than analog in terms of sound quality.
Wait, really? That's unexpected. For someone so rooted in the analog world, I thought he'd be all about vinyl.
It's not that simple. He's not stuck in the past. For him, it's still about how you use the technology.
So what's his thinking on why digital can be better?
He says that a lot of early digital recordings sounded too clean and sterile because producers were so used to working with tape. They would try to add warmth and saturation to compensate for the limitations of analog recording, and when they went digital, they just went overboard.
It's like they were afraid of how clear and precise digital was, so they tried to make it sound like something it wasn't.
Exactly. He even compares it to the early days of stereo when producers would pan everything hard left and right. It sounded so unnatural and unbalanced. Just because you have a new tool doesn't mean you know how to use it right.
That makes sense. But I'm curious about the actual sound quality. Does he admit that analog recordings sometimes have that warmth and character that digital lacks?
He actually talks about that directly. He says that a good digital file is like a perfect snapshot of a moment in time. It captures the sound exactly as it was recorded. But analog recordings, they change over time. Every time you play them, they lose a little bit of fidelity.
So he prioritizes sonic integrity above everything else.
Yes, and he says that while those imperfections and changes in analog recordings can create a certain charm, it's not necessarily better in terms of pure audio quality. He's more interested in capturing and preserving the essence of the music, no matter what the format is.
It's a really interesting perspective. It makes you wonder what he thinks about AI in music production these days.
That is a whole other discussion.
Oh, definitely.
But for now, I think we should talk about the impact Ben Liebrand has had on the dance music scene, particularly in the Netherlands. He inspired a whole generation of Dutch DJs, some of whom became like global superstars. What a legacy.
Absolutely. Names like Tiesto, Armin van Buuren, Ferry Corsten, they all say Ben Liebrand's mixes were a huge influence on them.
It's amazing to think someone who started with a cassette deck in his bedroom could have such a huge impact on music all over the world.
It just shows you the power of passion, dedication, and pushing creative boundaries. And Ben Liebrand's story isn't just about the past. He's still active today, still innovating and pushing the limits of mixing, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He's embraced digital DJing, but in a way that stays true to his roots and his focus on quality.
So he's not one of those DJs who just hit sync and lets the computer do all the work.
Definitely not. He still spends hours preparing his sets, editing tracks, making custom intros and outros to make his mixes flow and tell a story.
That's impressive. I'd love to hear more about how he approaches digital DJing and how his process has changed over time.
One thing that's really interesting is that he brings the same level of detail and precision to digital DJing as he did with analog. He was even one of the first DJs to use the Pioneer CDJ 1000s in Europe. He was right at the forefront of that whole digital DJing revolution.
He's like a bridge between the old school and the new school, proving that real artistry can go beyond any technology.
Exactly. He's adapted, but he's stayed true to his core values: quality, creativity, and that pure joy of mixing.
But I'm wondering, does he ever miss the old analog days, or is he fully on board with the possibilities of digital?
He definitely acknowledges what was special about analog and how it shaped his sound, but he doesn't seem sentimental about it. He sees digital tools as a way to be even more creative and do things that weren't possible before.
So what's he working on now? What projects is he excited about these days?
One project that really stands out is Grand 12 Inches. It's all about preserving and remastering classic 12-inch singles from the golden age of dance music. It's like sonic archaeology.
I've heard about that. The amount of detail and care he puts into it is fascinating. Tell me more about how he finds and restores these old masters.
It's pretty incredible. He'll compare like dozens of versions of the same track, looking through record stores, online auctions, even his own collection, trying to find the best sounding master. The lengths he goes to is just amazing.
It shows how much respect he has for the original recordings and his dedication to keeping them alive for future generations. But all this talk about preserving and remastering makes me wonder, does he ever think about his own legacy and how his work will be remembered?
I'm sure he's aware of his place in music history, but I don't think he dwells on it. He seems more focused on the present, on continuing to create and push himself artistically.
That's a great way to be. It's about the journey, not the destination.
Hmm.
But speaking of his legacy, what do you think is the most important part of Ben Liebrand's work? What will continue to inspire musicians for years to come?
That's a great question. I think it comes down to his ability to connect with listeners on an emotional level. He understands how music can move people, evoke feelings, create moments of pure joy. And that's something that will always be powerful no matter what happens with technology or musical trends.
He's a true master of his craft, and his passion is contagious.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what he does next.
Me neither. I have a feeling he has a few more surprises up his sleeve.
Well, on that note, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back to continue our deep dive into the incredible world of Ben Liebrand.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that emotional connection because I think people often overlook that when they're talking about the technical stuff about mixing. There's a real art to what he does, a deep understanding of how music can make you feel things and tell a story.
Totally. It's not just mixing tracks together. It's like creating a whole journey for the listener, taking them through different moods, tempos, even genres. But it all has to fit together and have a purpose.
Right, and I think his early work on those Grandmix projects really helped him develop that skill of making these sonic narratives. Remember, he only had an hour on the radio, so he had to find a way to make dozens of tracks flow seamlessly into one whole thing. That takes a deep understanding of how music is structured and arranged and how to build tension and then release it.
So it's like he was composing with other people's tracks, almost like a DJ-producer hybrid, before anyone even used that term.
Exactly. And that's something you can still see in his work today, even with all the digital tools he has. He's still all about creating those, what he calls sonic journeys, whether it's an hour-long radio mix or a 5-hour set in a club.
But let's go back to his views on digital versus analog for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still kind of stuck on how much he defends digital audio. It's like he's trying to prove everyone wrong who thinks analog is automatically better.
I think it comes from a place of really knowing what he's talking about. He was there for that whole transition and saw how producers messed up digital at first, all those harsh, sterile sounds that gave digital a bad reputation.
It's like he's saying, don't blame the tool, blame the user. He even compares it to those old stereo mixes where everything was panned hard left and right. So unnatural.
Right.
Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Exactly. It's about using your tools in a smart and creative way, whether they're analog or digital. And for him, digital gives you this level of precision and control that you just couldn't get with analog.
And let's not forget the practical side of things. Digital storage means he can have a massive music library and archive, which would have been impossible with just vinyl.
Absolutely. And being able to edit and change audio digitally opens up all these new creative possibilities for someone like Ben Liebrand.
But I have to disagree a little bit here. Isn't there something lost when you move from analog to digital? That warmth, that imperfection, that kind of human element that audiophiles love about vinyl?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I think it really comes down to what you personally prefer. But for Ben Liebrand, it seems like what's most important is that the sound is clear and accurate. He wants to capture the music in its purest form, and he thinks digital is the best way to do that.
And he does have a point about how analog recordings degrade over time.
Yeah.
Every time you play a vinyl record, you're wearing it down a little bit, losing some of that original sound.
That's true. A well-kept digital file could theoretically last forever, keeping the sound exactly as it was.
It makes you wonder what he'd say about AI in music production. That's a whole other conversation.
I'd love to hear his thoughts on that. It's such a hot topic right now.
Yeah, me too. But let's move on to his Grand 12 Inches project for a bit.
Yeah.
Because it really shows how dedicated he is to sound quality and how much he respects those classic dance tracks.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's more than just nostalgia for him. He's on a mission to find the absolute best versions of these songs, and he'll do whatever it takes to get them.
I read that he compares up to 50 different versions of the same track. He goes to record stores, online auctions, even digs through his own collection looking for the cleanest sounding masters.
And it's not just about finding a clean copy. He analyzes each version, really carefully listening for tiny differences in the EQ, the dynamics, the overall balance. He's searching for the definitive version, the one that best captures what the artist originally intended.
It's like he's an audio detective putting together clues to find the sonic truth.
Exactly. And all his hard work has been praised by a lot of the original artists and producers. They're so happy to see their music being treated with this much care and respect.
It's a good reminder that even in this age of streaming and compressed audio, there are still people who appreciate quality and craftsmanship. and Ben Liebrand is definitely one of them.
He really is. And speaking of supporting others, we should talk about how he mentors and helps the next generation of DJs and producers. Many of the artists he's influenced have gone on to have amazing careers themselves.
That's true. He's not just a great artist, he's also a great teacher and mentor. I've read interviews with some pretty big DJs who say he gave them really valuable advice and support early on in their careers.
He knows how important it is to pass on his knowledge and passion to younger artists, and it's not just about teaching them the technical stuff, it's about instilling a love and respect for music and encouraging them to find their own unique style.
That's amazing. But let's talk about his own evolution as an artist. He's been doing this for over 40 years, and he's always changing, experimenting with new sounds, new techniques, new technologies.
He's a master of adaptation, has managed to stay relevant and influential without sacrificing his artistic integrity, and that's something I really admire.
Totally. He's never been afraid to take risks, to push boundaries, to challenge himself creatively.
You know, there's a story about him DJing in Calgary, cowboy country. And instead of playing the country hits everyone expected, he played these deep disco cut stuff no one there had ever heard before, and he sold out the place.
That's awesome. Yeah. It shows you that he's not just trying to please the crowd. He's sharing his passion and his own vision, even if it's unexpected.
Exactly. And that confidence, that willingness to trust his gut is something that's really helped him throughout his career.
And speaking of trusting his gut, he's been pretty outspoken about some of the darker sides of the music industry, like ghost producing, where someone makes the music but doesn't get the credit.
He's absolutely right to call that out. It's a practice that exploits musicians and really hurts the creative process.
He's not afraid to speak truth to power, even if it makes some people uncomfortable. And that integrity is something I have a lot of respect for.
Me too. It reminds us that being a true artist isn't just about talent. It's about having good ethics, respecting your craft, and fighting for fairness and honesty in the industry.
And that brings us to an important question for our listeners. What do you find most inspiring about Ben Liebrand's journey? What connects with you on a personal level?
It's something to think about. What can we learn from his approach to music, his work ethic, his dedication to quality, and his willingness to speak his mind?
Those are great questions, and we'll explore them even more as we continue our deep dive into the world of Ben Liebrand. You know, it's an amazing thing that Ben Liebrand has been doing this for over 4 decades. In an industry that's always changing too. And he's still relevant, still influential. It's not just about nostalgia or, riding the wave of his old hits. He's always moving forward, trying new sounds techniques and new technologies, but never losing sight of what's important.
It shows you how adaptable he is and how well he really understands music. He's not stuck in one era or clinging to a specific sound. He's open to change and sees it as a chance to grow and be even more creative.
That's what makes him so interesting. He's embraced digital DJing, but he approaches it with the same attention to detail and dedication to the craft that he's always had. He's not just hitting sync and letting the computer do everything. He's still making those intricate mixes, layering acapellas, playing with tempos, all live in the moment.
He's actually said that it's about taking all those years of experience with analog gear, the limitations, the workarounds, the creative solutions, and using that knowledge in the digital world. He doesn't see digital tools as replacing human skill, but as a way to expand it.
I read somewhere that he even compares different digital audio workstations, like down to the technical details of how they handle clock timing and MIDI. I mean, who does that?
That's Ben Liebrand for you, a true sound geek. But that's what sets him apart. He's not just pushing buttons. He really gets the technology, which lets him do so much more with it, create those unique sounds that are so Ben Liebrand.
And he's always experimenting, blending genres, taking risks. There was this interview where he talked about making a 9-minute version of West End Girls by the Pet Shop Boys. He added live trumpet and turned the original song into this huge, sprawling soundscape. It's like he's always challenging himself, always looking for new ways to surprise people.
Yeah, he's got this restless creative energy. He's not content to just sit back and do the same thing over and over. He's always looking for the next sonic adventure, a new way to push boundaries and explore uncharted territory.
And it's not about just pleasing the crowd or following trends. Like that story about him DJing in Calgary, right? In cowboy country. And instead of playing country music like you'd expect, he played these obscure disco tracks, stuff no one there had ever heard.
Yeah.
And the place was packed.
That's what I'm talking about. It's the power of being genuine. He's not trying to be something he's not or water down his style. He's sharing his passion, his unique musical vision, and it connects with people no matter where they're from or what kind of music they usually listen to.
It reminds you that good music can break down any barrier. It connects us in a really deep way, and it can surprise us in the most unexpected ways. And I think that's a big part of Ben Liebrand's legacy. He shows us what's possible with creativity, passion, and this relentless pursuit of sonic perfection.
Absolutely. He's proven that you can stay true to your artistic vision while also embracing change and evolving over time. And he does it all with such joy, humility, and respect for the music and the artists he works with.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Ben Liebrand, what are your final thoughts? What will you take away from exploring his music and career?
For me, it's a reminder that being a true artist is a lifelong journey. It's about always pushing yourself, trying new things, and never losing that sense of wonder and excitement about creating. And it's about using your voice, your influence, to stand up for what you believe in, to fight for fairness and honesty in the industry, and to inspire the next generation of artists.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Right.
Ben Liebrand's story is truly inspiring for anyone who's ever dreamed of making something beautiful and meaningful, whether it's music, art, or anything that ignites your passion. He shows us that with dedication, hard work, and a willingness to embrace both tradition and innovation, anything is possible.